Hey, this is Brennon.
And this is Heather.
And you're listening to Shaped by Grace.
God calls us to live a holy life. But what exactly does this mean, and what does it look like on a daily basis?
So our hope is to explore how we are being shaped by grace through the good news of Jesus. So let's get into it.
Hey everybody, it's been a while. Yeah, so I know that we've been gone for a little bit. We did one after Elise was born and said we were going to try to do one every couple of weeks. Obviously that didn't happen.
So this is a couple of weeks in our book.
Yes. So just bear with us as we try to get back into a routine and figure out with our family schedule what works best with doing a podcast. We're still doing podcasts. We still want to do podcasts.
Yeah.
But 2 kids is hard.
For sure. It's an adjustment because you both are doing something all the time. It's not like, oh, here, you take the one child we have and I'll go do something. No, you're both in charge of a child almost at all times, unless one of you is not there.
Yeah, which for me is pretty much all during the day. So that gets real interesting. I basically don't do anything except keep children alive and take naps because it's so exhausting taking care of 2 children.
But Elise has joined us tonight at a whopping 10 pounds, 12 ounces.
Yeah, and that was a week ago, so she might be even more than that.
She's looking around. She's 2 months old now, chunky cheeks. She's super cute. She's just chilling. But she was like, I want to be on the podcast tonight. I'm not going to sleep. And so she's up with us, hanging out. But we kind of just want to give a life update and talk about what's been going on, what we've been studying, what we've been reading, what we feel like God is leading us to, what he's teaching us during this time. And so, yeah, that's what we're doing today. Nothing too crazy. I don't think my brain can handle that, as I'll talk about later. But so what's going on in our life?
Well, besides just adjusting to 2 kids, Adeline is getting to that age where she's understanding a lot more. And so that's been really cool. And so we're actually starting to do some memory verses with her. Obviously, she's not going to be able to repeat them, but we wanted to go ahead and start implementing verses that we memorize as a family. And so that's something we actually started today.
It's cool because for Adeline, we use song. And so I guess everything that we talk about tonight, we'll post on our Instagram story of resources that we either talk about and whatnot. So we can post those, a link to those videos. But they're really cool because it's a girl and she's doing some motions with them. But they're relatively short verses.
Yeah.
Tonight was 1 John 5, verses 4 and 5. But they make them into song. And so it's fun, not only for her, it helps us learn those things. Because I have a terrible memory, but that is something that, as I'll talk about a little bit, that I want to be better at, is memorization.
Yeah, and, I know worship can be a hot topic for some people because there are a lot of worship songs out there that are not theologically correct and they're more focused on the self. But this is literally scripture, so you can't really mess it up,
Yeah.
So we've been doing that with her, and she's not quite as jealous as she used to be with Elise. Elise is literally just the most chill baby, but so as a stay-at-home mom, I feel like I'm getting somewhat into a routine with the girls, which is about to get thrown off because Brennan is going to be at camp next week, and then he'll have a week off, and then he'll go back to camp for 2 weeks. And so our summers get real crazy because, youth minister life, you have camps, you have VBS, just things that need to be done around the church. And so it just, it'll get really interesting, but we're going to roll with it. What else has been going on? We got a minivan. I don't know if we said that in the last podcast.
We are official going into that soccer mom / dad van mode, because putting 2 car seats and the car that I have or had was pretty tight. Even the one I have now, it's kind of tight. And so I traded my car in, and we got a van. But It's awesome. I love it. It's very roomy.
Never thought I'd get a van, but here we are. Minivan life.
It's definitely a plan for the future too, because we do want more kids.
Yes.
So, but not right now, because Heather would kill me.
Yes, I would.
You made that clear.
Mama needs a pregnancy break. I love babies. I think they're so fun. And I really don't mind the newborn stage. I know some people are like, it's awful, but it doesn't bother me that much.
At least it's fun.
Pregnancy, not a fan of pregnancy.
Yeah.
Whatsoever. Is it a miracle? Absolutely. Is it a gift from the Lord? Absolutely. But some people love being pregnant, love feeling the glow, love feeling the baby kicks. I don't glow. Both of my children kicked like crazy, and it was just uncomfortable. I never slept. It's just not my thing. So I need a break. But more babies will be in the future, just not smoke.
Yeah, we need to get through a couple of things. I finished my spring semester of school, and so I'm almost a year in. I have my summer courses, but spring semester was pretty easy. We did Old Testament and New Testament, and I learned a ton. And one of the main reasons we haven't done a podcast is because this new class that I'm in, this is week 3, has been, it's been tough. A lot of new material, categories that I've never even thought of before. And so my brain's kind of been in overload mode with all the readings and just trying to grasp some of this stuff. I was never a big history buff, and this is a lot of history of the ancient East. Not that we learned that in school anyway, but hey, at least. So that's been going on. But I think that's kind of what I wanted to talk about tonight, as far as what I've been learning in school. That'll maybe pique someone's interest to continue studying in that. But this class that I'm currently in is all about learning how to look at Scripture and do what's called exegesis, look at it in context, look at it in historical context, specifically is what we've been reading around about lately, and learning just about the culture of all the countries that were around Israel. Do you think I'm funny? Lisa's laughing. She's like, "Oh, you're so funny, Dad. That stuff's so boring. No one wants to listen to that." But it's been so very interesting. And I think one of the things that I learned that I think is going to help me just appreciate Scripture more is how it was passed down in the Old Testament, even in the New Testament, but how each generation passed it down through speaking it to one another. It's orality versus textuality, the spoken history of Scripture versus the written down of what we have now with Scripture. And it's really cool to think about the community that was built around the orality. Oh, I don't even know how to say that word because I've been reading it for so long, but just the oral not translation. What is the word I'm looking for? Just
tradition?
The oral tradition of passing down Scripture as a community. Like they would, like verses have come to life that I've read, like about keeping it on your heart, keeping it on your lips. But families used to just gather around in groups and share stories about Scripture. And that's how it was passed on for a long time. It wasn't written down for a long time. It was written down after most of the events had happened. And so that's been really interesting. Something that I haven't really thought about until now. And so that's one thing that I've been learning. What's something that you've been learning?
So I think for me, it's so different. Like Brennan, I feel like Brennan is on this huge seminary level and is reading all the time and learning all of these wonderful, great things. And then there's me who's like, I'm not struggling to survive, but like reading is just not on the top of my to-do list at the moment. Not because I don't want to read. It's I just don't really have the time or like the mental capacity to do some of the stuff that like Brennan, like the deep stuff that Brennan is doing.
Not easy. I am mentally exhausted.
Yeah.
I don't want to make it sound like it's a piece of cake. And I think that's what's been hard to kind of balance all that.
Yeah. Because Brennan, because he will go to work at the church. And then when he's done with his stuff, like he has, a lot of time to be able to read and do his homework. Whereas I'm home with the girls. And so, by the time they get down to a nap, if they both nap at the same time, which doesn't really happen very often, I'm just so mentally exhausted by that point that I don't really get the opportunity to read. So I definitely don't read every day in the sense of like reading other things outside of scripture, if that makes sense. But I'm trying to make that part of my daily routine. But again, still kind of learning in that area.
You started one of the books that I'd recommended.
Yeah. So I did start reading that, and I'm enjoying it, and just talking about the Old Testament and understanding how the Old Testament was written, understanding the historical and cultural context of the Old Testament. Like how the patriarchal society worked and the just a lot of the things kind of help to put it into context why some of the things were done the way they were. It's really cool. I've learned some stuff from that.
I think it's good for us to read stuff like that because, that culture doesn't exist in America.
No.
It's so, and I think that's what's helped me enjoy scripture so much more is because now I get a glimpse of how they saw scripture. Do I fully understand it? No. Will I ever? Probably not. But just getting that little glimpse, I don't know, it makes me have a new appreciation for the word.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so I was reading that. I just finished the Old Testament, and I just finished, I've been trying to read through the Bible, like straight through, and I've had to switch it up every now and then, and so I haven't quite done it on the timeline that other people do it. But so I'm in Mark right now, and so if you've not watched The Chosen,
recommend it.
Yes, 100%. It is
1,000%.
So good, and it's theologically correct. It's historically correct.
Yeah, I like the little. It's like salt and pepper on top. Just like the flavoring of the culture and.
Yeah, and really cool. And of course they do take some creative liberties. I mean. Yeah. Even if you read the book of John, like at the end of it, it talks about there's so much that is not written that Jesus did. Yeah. And it gives Jesus a personality. Like he's not just this, like Jesus was a person, like he had a personality. Even reading some of the stuff that he said, like he was a little, he was funny. Yeah. And so it gives him a personality, and it gives a little bit of a backstory to the disciples. And obviously there's not as much detail in scripture, and so they do take a little bit of creative liberty, but it's nothing like heresy or anything that.
Quick question about The Chosen. Who is your favorite character in The Chosen?
Probably Matthew.
Oh, he's still mine. He's got to be my favorite.
Yeah, I really like Matt. Obviously, everyone's gonna say Jesus, but
I wasn't.
I know, but the way they do portray Jesus is awesome because like I said, they give him personality. But Matthew is really cool. I mean, we have no idea if Matthew was actually autistic or if he had some type of disability or anything like that. But in the show, they portray him as that. Again, that's one of those creative liberties that they took. But it's really cool the way they portray him.
He's on like a whole nother level as far as the schooling that he got, the intellectual ability that he has, and then how they portray him. But when you read through Matthew, you see those traits. Like you see that he loves numbers.
Yeah.
You read through Matthew, you will see the same patterns over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool that they saw that and they specifically chose that to portray him as in the in The Chosen.
Yeah. And I think for people that have disability, I think it's had a really big impact on them and being able to see that on the screen. And that's been really cool. But back to why that I brought that up. Reading Matthew and then reading Mark and reading through just about Christ and his mission here on earth before he died on the cross. Like now I have a show in mind that kind of helps me to see some of that stuff. Like it gives me more of a visual. And, when you see on The Chosen, like when he does some of the healings that he does, and then you're reading about it, it just kind of helps to make it more impactful. And not personal. That it didn't impact me before, but it, when you are able to visualize something and you're able to give more context to it than what is written on the page, it really does help because, there is a lot of detail that we don't see. And so being able to kind of think about like, oh, wow, there is more detail than just this. There's this, like each of the disciples had lives. Jesus had a life, and there were conversations that were had outside of what scripture says. And we don't know what those conversations are. And so to kind of see like what the conversations they had could have been about and how the disciples interacted with each other, like imagine, like seeing that play on the screen. It's really cool. And so it kind of makes it cool to like read through scripture and kind of think like, what did they talk about when they were just having downtime?
Yeah.
So that's been really cool to kind of process and think about as I'm reading scripture.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think a lot of times when we're reading or studying, they just become words on a page. And, the Bible is real. And the Bible, the people that Jesus healed, like he affected people. He changed the trajectory of lives. And I think The Chosen shows that. Another thing that I've been super interested in, I actually just finished a podcast today on it. And if you want to check it out, The Bible Project, it's their latest episode. But it's how the nations around Israel saw what their creation story was. Oh, that's so interesting. I'm not going to bore you to death with details, but there's a lot of similarities. And I think a lot of people will say, oh, no, well, did the Bible like steal the creation story from them? No, but Israel was influenced by the culture around them. And it's not wrong. Like how they viewed the world, the people around them viewed the world similarly. It's just like, the world today. A lot of people in the world have a similar worldview about how things are, how the solar system works, how gravity works. And so it's the same thing back then. But I found it super interesting. And it brings to life Genesis. And in the book Heather's reading, that's kind of the focus, is to show how much scripture points to Genesis, and how that story is retold over and over again. And it's super nerdy, and I don't think it's for a lot of people, but it just encourages me more and makes me feel so tiny. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know anything compared to like the knowledge that God has, and how he's created the worlds and humanity, and how we got to where we were, or where we are. Like, this just, it blows my mind how, the scribes took all these oral accounts and wrote scripture and translated it, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
It is a lot for our minds to wrap around, but that's how good God is, to use humanity in our fallen state to get his goal accomplished.
Yeah.
That's cool. And he's using us today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Jesus commanded us in the Great Commission to go out and make disciples. And you couldn't tell the difference between the discipler and the disciplee at some point in that relationship. So, like, for example, in The Chosen, John the Baptist, some say, oh, is he Elijah? Like, because he looks so much like a disciple of Elijah as far as like what he's preaching, what he's teaching. And the same goes on with Jesus. Like, who is this guy? Like, is he like related? Is he tied together with John the Baptist? Is because he was preaching the same message? I don't know, tangent, but I feel like that's where my mind's been lately.
Yeah. Yeah, and to go back to what you were saying about, learning all of this stuff. We've been doing like a women's Bible study, and it's one of Jen Wilkins' books, but one of the things that she mentioned was like, God doesn't learn anything. Like, there's nothing for him to learn. He's never had to learn anything. He's just always known everything.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing to really think about. And one of the things that was cool that she just talked about is, at the end of the chapter that we went over, was it last week or the week before, she talked about how we're in such this age of just knowledge. Like, we have Google at our fingertips. Like, we literally have at our fingertips. We can learn anything we want at just in, milliseconds, and how that's really not good for us. Like, I don't think we were meant to learn everything. I always think about the movie, it was the new Indiana Jones movie, like not the ones from the 80s, but the one that came out with Shia LaBeouf. Like, the lady, the bad guy, I might ruin this movie for y'all, but it's really not that great of a movie. So but she takes the skull at the end, and she's like wanting to learn everything. And so they start giving her, and then it just becomes too much, and she dies because it's literally too much for her brain.
Does her head explode?
I don't remember.
That'd be cool.
It probably did. But like, there's so many movies like that where it's like, people, they're like, I want to know everything.
Yeah. And
like, we're not meant to know everything. And that's okay. And one of the questions that she asked about at the end was, is what you're learning edifying and glorifying to God? Is it helping you to push the gospel forward?
Yeah.
Or is it just for you?
Yeah.
Just so you know something?
Yeah, knowledge puffs up.
Yeah, and that convicted me because I am a Googler. I will Google the mess out of stuff. I like knowing things.
She won't even watch the movie. She'll just like Wikipedia it and find out all the things that.
Well, if I'm not that interested in the movie, that's why I do it.
You would figure out.
Yeah, but like sometimes I'm just like, I don't really feel like watching this, so I'm just gonna see what happens.
But I think piggybacking off of what you said, and one of the things I was reading. One of the famous, it's not Socrates. Oh, Plato. It's actually Plato. he, in one of his writings, this character has this dream, and he goes up to the king and he says, "Hey, king, I've created this thing. It's called the alphabet, and we'll use it to record history, and people will be so much smarter because we will have it written down." And the king's like, "Don't do that." And the character's like, "Why?" And he said, "It's because if we write things down, we will forget it." And it's really true. Like, we're terrible at memorization. Why? Because I can literally click on my phone, look up the Bible app, and find scripture right there. But we don't take the time to actually memorize it and learn it. And that's what Plato was getting at, is memorization is key to, understanding and actually having a relationship with what you're learning. And that's one thing that I feel like God's pushing me towards is, yeah, you can, know all this stuff, but are you applying it to your life? Are you living it? And I think memorization is a good thing, a good practice for us to have, because when we do come into trials, when we are teaching people, like, we have scripture to back up, what we're doing, and we want to do that with Adeline and Elise and with each other. But I'm a terrible memorizer. I've been trying to memorize those verses that are in the shower, the Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 16, for like a month and a half now.
Yeah.
But
I bet you know all the words to some of your favorite songs from high school.
Oh, yeah. Justin Bieber, for sure. I actually was just singing Justin Bieber with Jeremy Flores. Yeah. Shout out Jeremy Flores if you're listening.
Yeah, it's so silly how our brains, like, do that.
Yeah. And so I guess we would just want to encourage you to be a lifelong learner. Like, you don't have to get into the nitty gritty, but we want you to know the gospel. We want you to know who Jesus is. We want you to know that he loves you and he cares for you. And we want you to enjoy reading scripture, but don't do it alone. Do it with somebody. Share with what you're learning with somebody, because not only is it encouraging to other people, that's how you learn. And so I think where we're at in life, that's kind of what we want to do. And we want to have this podcast to kind of share what we're learning, to encourage you, and to hopefully edify the Lord, to give him glory and honor for what's going on in our lives.
Yeah. Yep. So I think that's about it. We would love to know if there is
topics.
Yeah.
To talk about.
Because Brennan's brain is like mush, and mine's pretty much not far from it.
I'm sure you don't want to talk about locution and illocution, because I'm tired of reading about it.
I have literally no idea what those words are.
I still don't know, and it's week 3. No, actually, kind of know, but it's not fun to talk about. And I'm sure we'll only have like 2 listens on that podcast. So, yeah, send us some topics, please. We would love that.
Yes. So that's about it. Well, I'm glad we finally did this, even though I've been saying on Instagram that we would be doing this, multiple times already.
Yeah, we'll send on our story, we'll put some cool resources, what we're reading, what we're doing, all that jazz. But thanks for listening. We appreciate you guys. We love you. Peace out.
Bye.